Quotation from myself, segment 84, quotation number 999. No matter how ostensibly nice, absorbing the etiquette of the polite society we are to each other, unless it is the natural outcome of mutual respect and liking, the aftertaste of insincerity and artificiality, like the proverbial fly in the ointment, never goes away. It continues to spoil the pleasure of social intercourse, and eventually, triggered often by some wholly insignificant remark, will explode in anger caused by the pent-up frustration over having to pretend for too long to feel what one really doesn't. And such an inevitable explosion is the best proof of the fundamental falsity of such a mode of human interaction, no matter how widely acceptable and almost universally approved it is. Quotation 1000. The common notion and standard definition to the contrary, the personal authenticity seldom comes naturally, and therefore effortlessly, with a possible exception perhaps in the very early childhood, though even then, whatever natural there is in the child is being gradually beaten and punished physically, psychologically out of him. Later on, while growing up, which is in social sense actually means being continuously molded and shaped by the carrots and sticks in order to conform to the mode of behavior acceptable to this or that particular society, the older one gets, the more difficult it is to remain true to oneself. Consequently, to maintain personal authenticity requires daily struggle, whose victories are few and far in between, and then mostly of the pure kind. For like many other highly praised human virtues, the authenticity is as universally admired as it is continually and commonly persecuted. 1001. I think it is quite natural for the parents who have traded in their own dreams for the daily bread to expect the children to do the same. Therefore, it is not surprising that they are deeply resentful and hurt when their children refuse to do so. For such parents tend to interpret, rightly or wrongly, the unwillingness on the part of a child to follow the suit as a condemnation of the kind of choices they themselves have made. And this can eventually lead to the terrible realization, suppressed and denied for a long time, that after all one's life was not a success, not even the modest and mediocre one, but the abysmal and even tragic failure, which can help to explain why so often the midlife crisis of a parent coincides with the youthful rebellion of a child. For at the end of the day, our children are our ultimate justification. But not all parents draw the same conclusion from the similar life experiences of trade-offs and compromises. Some will do just the opposite. That is, they would do their best to help the children to avoid the bitterness of making the same sacrifices they have made, sometimes going so far as to impose their own unfulfilled dreams or the variation thereof on a child who doesn't yet have any of his own. For let's face it, there are a lot of children out there who don't know what they want to do with their lives. And finally, in either case, the intergenerational harmony would depend as always on whether the children do what their parents think is best for them, which, as we just saw, is highly subjective. 1002. The price of being born includes, among the other things, having to cope with the ways one parents treat each other, which in the average family means trying to survive with the least amount of wounds and scars as possible, the permanent state of spousal war, in which a child is often used as a weapon, besides being both a witness and the inevitable casualty. 1003. While the polyphony of being carries within these joys and sorrows, the ecstasy and despair of life, it is in a single tone of silence that we seek the truth and the meaning of it all. 1004. Acknowledging as self-evident that man is a social animal, and as such cannot survive, let alone prosper, in isolation, but has to belong to some community to do so, the real and perhaps the most important question one has to find the answer to is, what each of us, being a part of this community, owns to its other members. What are one's social and personal obligations as a son or a daughter, as a friend, as a spouse, as a parent, as a co-worker, as a citizen, etc.? And is it possible to answer all these questions without knowing what one owns to oneself? Or in other words, where do social obligations stop and personal begin, or vice versa? 1005. Sorry, let me mention just one more good thing about being old. I'm afraid I'm beginning to like it. It is that my relationship with other men are no longer marred by the rivalries and competition for physical strength, attractiveness, woman attention, wealth, position, fame, etc. And now I can finally enjoy the brotherhood of men, completely free of mistrust and fear that plagued my life so much when I was younger. 1006. Agreeing in advance that neither the absolute freedom nor the absolute absence of it is possible, the degree of personal liberty or slavery depends on the degree of separation of an individual from his or her environment, both human and material. That is, the less one is connected to other people or things, the more free one is, and on the other hand, the more one is entangled in the affairs of the world, which is a mixture of both, the less freedom one has. In a word, self-sufficiency equals freedom. The dependence spells slavery. 1007. Though there is nothing new under the sun, one who succeeds or simply lucky in coining a new term to describe the old phenomenon, observed, contemplated, and discussed in different times and by many before him, nevertheless usually goes down into history as a sole discoverer of it, and not just a clever inventor of a catchy name. Consequently, his own name begins from then on to be associated with, or sometimes even used as eponym, for this particular phenomenon, while everybody else, no matter how perceptive their observation of it were hitherto, who had failed in this seemingly most important from a historical point of view act of naming, are forgotten. So the answer to the question, what is in the name, as far as appropriation, as far as apportioning of the credits is concerned, should be everything. Now, what makes one term to be so much more popular than all others before, it is difficult to tell. Perhaps it's just an accident of a good timing, when everybody is ready and eager for the new and improved. Or maybe it is something as impalpable as the sound of a word that makes people feel, on a purely auditory, phonetic level, that it belongs there here, and so much so that all the rest is discarded as inadequate. And the one who introduced this from now on the most favorite term and definition, reaps rightly or wrongly the accolades of the future generation. O fame, how fickle, unpredictable, and often undeserving you are. 1008. For everyone who has something to give, there are always many more who are eager to take. So, if the greatest reward of generosity is, as it is proclaimed, and rightly so, to be, that the gift is accepted, the giver should never be discouraged by the apparent ingratitude of some of the takers. For the very act of taking is the best proof that one's generosity, if not oneself, is appreciated. 1009. As far as I am concerned, the only thing that is worse than talking to somebody who has the misfortune of being poorly educated and stupid, the quality which may or may not belong together, is to endure a conversation/discussion with someone laboring under the grievous misapprehension that prolonged studies automatically bestow superior understanding and even wisdom on its practitioners. And though neither narrow-mindedness and intolerance of the illiterate, nor the arrogance and conceit of the educated are inevitable, it is still distressingly common and dangerous in its consequences to be alarmed, regardless whether one can or cannot do something about it. 10.10. Contrary to the popular thinking, being a nonconformist can save sometimes from a lot of aggravation and pain, while following the accepted rules of conduct could put one in a harm's way. For though it is true that conformity with the prevailing and approved pattern of behavior is rewarded, and the failure to do so is punished by any group, from family to a state, in certain circumstances, when this group embarks, for whatever reason, on a perilous journey, one's refusal to join could be of great advantage to the individual with enough common sense and courage to disobey something he knows in advance to be potentially dangerous. On the other hand, history is full of examples when blind conformity brought terrible disasters and destruction to its numerous faithful practitioners. And if one has to write a prescription on how to deal with this common predicament, the best advice as always would be to be flexible. For there is time for everything under the sun, a time to be a conformist and a time to be a non-conformist. And the trick, I guess, is to know which is which at any particular moment and in any specific circumstances, and not to confuse one with another.